This 7.5-minute long video takes place in an apartment. Eryck is a man in his 30s with a light brown complexion, short black hair and neatly trimmed beard. Throughout the video he performs yoga and dance, showing the flexibility and flowing movement of his body. A man in his 30s sits meditating with his eyes closed. The heels of his hands are pressed together and his fingers spread like the petals of a flower. A caption appears with a name, Eryck. Eryck appears in his apartment, standing in one place, his body moving in sinuous twists and turns.
One of the ways that I think of how we can think of the word authenticity is not to become more of who we are, but to let go of what we're not.
Topless, his light brown body is muscular and smooth. He lunges forward on a yoga mat, one arm supporting him on the floor. The other hand takes hold of one foot and draws it back towards his buttocks. His body flexes. He presses his forehead onto his knees, legs straight.
With yoga, it's almost like a performance. Once I know that you start class, like you can see, right? There's a certain point, it's like, oh God, he's got a different voice. And that way I know that I'm going to deliver and I have a message that I want to say, and you might not see all those insecurities. That's me being in charge of the room there. And then when it comes into the part where maybe I'm the employee and I'm the dancer being part of the company, that could be, I don't always embrace like what I am capable of. I think often in pieces, that has maybe been my role. Like, I've always been the person who starts the piece, but necessarily not part of the group. I don't know where that comes on a deeper level, but for a while I used to feel that it was my approach of just maybe that slight introversion was making me feel that I felt a bit transparent.
He stands in the archer pose, arms level with his shoulders, looking along one hand.
I think it's self-inflicted, but I couldn't unpick the process of why that was. Like, what is it that I'm doing that I'm trying to deflect attention from myself, or not being able to integrate into the group? Or was it something that was like an addiction, like a habit? So because of that, I'm like not wanting to share all-encompassing in who I was. So it doesn't allow other people in. And then because of that, over time, it's like almost like they see you a bit less.
He meditates, eyes closed, a calm expression on his relaxed face. Gripping one wrist, his body twists left and right.
So often we confuse going to our yoga classes as having to be, again, a nice experience, whereas if we're just only doing that, we're only showing one side of the coin. In the same way, like I was saying about myself, like I felt like I was always just revealing one side of the coin rather than just saying, okay, there's all this that I'm not necessarily proud of, or I don't really know what I'm doing in this, I'm a little bit lost, but I'm not going to reach out to you, it's fine. I'll keep myself safe in this space here. So there's metaphors within the yoga that can help you understand that this is what you need to do, and actually to be like a really real person, like a really authentic person, then you have to cut away pretending that it's just all nice and all perfect and it's all good. And actually there's a lot of stuff which is quite shit, and there's a lot of stuff which is very muddy. And that's why you have a representation of like a lotus flower, because a lotus flower is all clean and there's no mud on the petals, but the water is all muddy and it comes in the roots, and all of that is murky, but it grows, and if the conditions are right, it will go to the flower. But we can't have that without that. And that's like us. Like, some people want to be seen as putting on the front that everything is perfect in their lives, and so often the people that are having perfect lives are the people that are most out of control.
He arches up into a crab.
I don't necessarily think I was out of control, but I think that there was definitely an avoidance of just not embracing all of who you are.
His body flexes and his arms twist behind him. He balances on his hands, one leg stretched towards his head, the other reaching back.
In dance studio, how that would then turn out, how that would manifest, would be to not go into those, really potentially dangerous areas, or those really revealing areas, or do all that like hard inner work, like that soul searching stuff. When I was a dancer, I always thought I had tight hips. and everything like that, and like I was locked in my hips. So going back to the energy center, this is about creativity and expression. Dancers are generally connected to their creativity and expression, and so whether you feed that through your improvisations or just create material, with these chakra centers, you can either have too much of a connection with it, too little of a connection with it, or a balanced connection with it. I feel that for me, I've never had don't think like I've had an addictive personality, but I think that everyone has an addiction of some regard. But I think like my connection to the pelvis was through sexuality. Being a Scorpio who's connected to emotions quite a lot, maybe too much, from a very young age, just like sex being a prominent thing. Whether it's not like something that I search out for, but it's like an important part necessarily of who you are. So in that way, it can be like you find your mechanisms to cope with that, right? And I always thought that to keep that in check, to make sure that you're not the person who's feeding their sexual desire too much, to keep that balanced rather than being over greedy with that.
He arches back and bounces upright. His arm scoops up over his head and his spine flexes like an eel. He turns and rolls his shoulders back, coiling one arm behind him, lifting one knee high and sinking out of view.
Moving on from that, I remember when I went through a breakup, when I was going my yoga practice, I couldn't do any back bends at all, and it hurt physically to do anything that felt like I was opening up around my ribs. And so everything I've done for basically 2 years has just been a back bending practice.
He arches back into a crab.
When the knots of the heart are loosened, then the mortal becomes immortal. And then this summarizes the teaching of the scripture.
His arms pump back round his shoulders like pistons, eyes closed.
So if you think of that as just the one thing that if we can all learn as what yoga can help us to do, is to recognize where we're bound, and where we're knotted, and where we're tied, and where we're interwoven and locked.
His body twists and he flops out of sight. A caption appears. Eryck. Credits. This was a collaboration and co-directed by Stuart Waters, Eryck Brahmania and Rosie Powell. Movement by Eryck Brahmania. Audio description by Willie Elliott.